Midlife can feel like a turning point. Kids grow up, careers shift, and the connections that once grounded us can start to fade. But it can also be a great time to rediscover connection. After all, it's essential for our health and well-being. So let's have a look at why connection is so important and how we can go about keeping that feel of connection even with so many things around us are changing. I've never been someone who has looked for a lot of friends. I've never been someone who has really enjoyed big parties or something like that. I'd probably describe myself as a classic introvert. I have a group of friends that I really enjoy their company, and I really value that. But for a lot of people, connection is something that can start slipping away, particularly in midlife, particularly when you have something like early retirement or redundancy or a career change. When we say goodbye to that career, when we say goodbye to that company on that last day, the next day, things have changed. Things have changed big time. It's not a straight away thing and we don't realise it, and that's why something like loss of connection is something that can creep up on us. When we leave the office for the last time, those conversations are almost frozen in time. All the connections that we have, all the relevance, the conversations, the subject, the knowledge matter that we have, it's all frozen in time. So anytime that we actually have conversations with people, all our references are from the last time we were actually there. And we're all different with these things. Some people can keep contact with people for a long time. You know, some people can go right back to when they were at school. I'm not one of those people. My group of friends is a group that has evolved, a group where some people come in, some people leave. It's just a natural way in the way things have gone. When you've lost out those everyday connections with people, it can be something that you don't notice to start with. It can be a really slow, simple thing. I remember there was a friend of mine, and for one reason or another, he had become disconnected from a lot of things. You know, the job had gone, he'd done a course, the course had finished, he wasn't keeping in touch with them. And every time we went and met, I'd have to give over an hour for him to explain what he'd done on the latest game that he had, because that's where most of the connection was. And eventually I was like, okay, I've heard enough of the games, let's move on to something else. And he got out of it after a while. But I found myself doing the same thing. I found myself, after a few weeks, of most of my conversations would reference in some way something I'd seen on YouTube. And I thought, hold on, that is my connection. And the funny thing is that these connections, and it was my son that pointed out, he calls it parasocial, it's a common enough phrase. But these are connections that sometimes it's perfectly okay to have, but it's a one-sided connection, obviously. But sometimes it keeps us going, and that's what we need. But when you realise that this is the kind of connection that you've now got, I think we have to then start doing something about it. Because if we don't, then we lose out on so much. Connection's such an important thing. It's not just the loneliness factor. It has effects as far as our physical health is concerned, our mental health. The more that we lose connection with people, loneliness creeps in. And that's a vicious circle, because when we start not wanting to go out and we start thinking that we don't really need people quite so much, when we don't recognise that these things like talking about nothing but games or YouTube, when we start allowing that into our lives, then we start feeling worse. And the worse we feel, the less connection, the less time we actually spend trying to connect with people. And one of the things that can actually make worse is doing things like some kind of substance abuse, whether it be alcohol, whether it be drugs, whether it be overeating. Where's that connection? And one of the things, because I do quite a lot with people who want to be alcohol free. And one of the things we say in that is that connection is the opposite of addiction. Sometimes, as the saying goes, in the middle of a large crowd it can be very, very lonely. But I sometimes think that what we're really looking for is different ways of handling that connection, that lost connection. We can be in that crowd and still feel lonely because we're not realising that there are connections there. There's a whole host of things, and sometimes we have to be a little bit creative about it. For instance, recognising that there's micro connections, you know, just those nods, those good mornings, those saying hello to somebody just as you're wandering by them. These micro connections, the ones in the shops when you're getting a paper or picking up some messages, these can be so important to us in the middle of the day. These are the things that can keep us going. And then there's a whole load of other connections that we have that we might not realise. And one of the important things about connection is those shared experiences. And whilst we might not be able to share the experience with all the friends that we used to, or all the connections that we used to have, we can still be aware of things. For instance, making sure we keep up to date with the news. We're still aware of what's going on, so therefore we have those shared experiences. When we feel that we've lost connection, there's the usual things that people suggest, you know, like joining groups and what have you. And that can work if you can find a group that's right for you. Nowadays, there's more and more things, like for men, for instance, which has always been something that lacked. So you've got things like men's sheds, which is helping a lot. But not everybody takes to that. It's not the sort of thing that suits everybody. But when we start looking at other things, such as digital connection, yes, something I went and described earlier, which was the parasocial thing, where there's that one-way connection with people on social media, or that kind of thing. And that can be useful. That does give us something at a time when maybe we need more there. But there's other things with digital connection. It's a way of staying in touch with people without getting ourselves dragged into worrying about, oh, so-and-so's done this, look at the holiday they've got, look at them, they're doing these things. But if we can filter that out, we can still see our friends, we can still keep in touch with them, you know, we can still share experiences. And this is something that is important, and I think we can actually miss out on quite a bit, and we forget that it's not there. So it's important to keep those alternative channels open. That's where I think we miss out on quite a lot. Because it's not just shared experience, it's that community connection. It's the feeling that we belong somewhere. And sometimes digital is where we can find that. There are some fantastic groups around the internet. There's a whole load of ones that are absolutely rubbish, but there's some that are really good and can give us that sort of support that helps us a great deal. And don't forget, there's others that are maybe not so obvious, like the connection with ourselves, the connection with nature, getting out and connecting and seeing nature, seeing the country, taking a walk in somewhere other than just around your local streets. These sorts of things, those connections help a great deal as well. And there's a spiritual connection there as well. That doesn't just have to be a religious thing. It can be anything, you know, feeling part of a bigger thing, feeling part of a bigger community, feeling part of the world, if you like. Getting out and about does that. And looking at the different kinds of connections that are possible is really, really important. So in summing up, connection isn't something that once it's lost, it's gone. We can reconnect, we can rejuvenate those connections, we can bring new life into it, we can create new connections with different people, different things, different communities. And as long as we bring about a certain amount of presence to it, as long as we are being active about it, showing some kind of curiosity, that's going to help us an awful lot. That's going to get us a long way. And remember, we just need to take one step at a time. We don't need to do lots and lots. We don't need to suddenly be part of a massive group, especially if you're not the sort of person, like myself, if you're not the sort of person that likes large groups, if you're not the sort of person that is the life and soul of the party, which is absolutely fine, then do what you're comfortable with. But there is so much more that connection can bring. Physical health, mental health, the connection with people, there's so much more that it can bring. Anyway, that's me for this week. Hopefully you get something from that, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Okay, thanks very much. Bye-bye.